This is part of the complete history of House Targaryen, from the Doom of Valyria to their fall in Westeros. In this episode, we'll uncover what happened to Essos after the Doom, when the great empire vanished in fire and chaos, and the world was torn apart in what came to be known as the Century of Blood. It began with fire. In the year 102 BC, the world changed forever. In a single day, perhaps even in mere hours, the greatest empire in the known world was obliterated. The Valyrian Freehold, a dominion that had ruled the western half of Essos for centuries, vanished in fire and smoke so intense that even dragons, creatures born of flame itself, were consumed by the inferno. What followed was not order, not peace, but a century of blood. The collapse of Valyria left behind a power vacuum so vast that no single city, kingdom, or people could fill it. For nearly 100 years, Essos was torn apart by war, ambition, and bloodshed. To understand the magnitude of what came after, we must first grasp what was lost. For nearly 5,000 years, Valyria had ruled the eastern continent with fire and dragon flame. From their volcanic peninsula, the Valyrians had conquered the old empire of Guise, forced the proud Rhoynar into exile across the narrow sea, and established 8 of the 9 free cities, with Braavos being the sole exception. With their dragons, sorcery, and legions, the Freehold seemed eternal. But eternity ended in a single day. The Doom destroyed everything. Whole bloodlines of dragonlords perished. Their cities became smoldering ruins. Those few who survived were not the greatest or the strongest. They were merely the ones far enough away from Valyria when fire consumed the world. Among them were the Targaryens, who had relocated to Dragonstone 12 years before, warned by the prophetic dream of Daenys the Dreamer. In the immediate aftermath, the world looked to those who still carried Valyrian blood. One of them was Aurion, a dragonlord who happened to be in Qohor when the Doom struck. Seeing opportunity in the chaos, he crowned himself Emperor of Valyria. With his dragon and an army of 30,000 Qohoric soldiers, Aurion marched to reclaim the smoking ruins of the Freehold. Neither he, nor his army, nor his dragon were ever seen again. His story ended in fire and silence, a grim reminder that Valyria was gone, and it would never return. But surely a great city could succeed where an individual could not. Volantis, the eldest and mightiest of the free cities, had always considered itself Valyria's first daughter. Now, with the parent empire destroyed, the Volantines declared themselves the rightful heirs to dominion over all of Essos. Within Volantis, power was divided between 2 factions, the Tigers and the Elephants. The Tigers, aggressive nobles who descended from Valyrian dragonlords, believed themselves rightful heirs to Valyria's empire. They demanded war and conquest. The Elephants, who were merchants and traders, preferred commerce over combat. But in the wake of the Doom, it was the Tigers who seized power. Volantis unleashed its armies upon Essos. Their initial successes were stunning. Volantis conquered Lys and Myr, 2 of the free cities, and controlled them for 2 full generations. They commanded the southern reaches of the Rhoyne River and seemed unstoppable. The Tigers' vision of a new Valyrian empire appeared within reach, but empires built on conquest often collapse from overreach, and Volantis was no exception. When the Volantines attempted to add Tyrosh to their collection of subject cities, resistance finally crystallized. What had been scattered opposition became a grand alliance against Volantine expansion. Tyrosh rose against them, aided by Pentos. Myr and Lys turned from subjects into rebels. Qohor and Norvos forged an alliance and shattered Volantis' fleets on the Rhoyne. Even Braavos, the secretive city in the north, sent 100 ships to Lys to aid the resistance. The war spread far and wide. Armies clashed in the disputed lands. Mercenary companies were born in the chaos, the free companies, whose swords are still for hire centuries later. Even Westeros felt the pull of war. Argilac Durrandon, the Storm King, led an army into the disputed lands and defeated a Volantine force attempting to retake Myr. It seemed the entire world had united against Volantis' imperial ambitions. Perhaps most significantly, Pentos and Tyrosh approached the last surviving dragonlords, House Targaryen, on Dragonstone. Young Aegon Targaryen, who would one day conquer Westeros itself, agreed to join the alliance. Mounting his great dragon Balerion, he flew to Lys, where a Volantine invasion fleet was preparing to sail. What followed was a preview of the conquest to come. Dragonfire turned the entire fleet to ash and cinder. The Volantines, desperate to reclaim their crumbling empire, sent another fleet to retake Valyria itself. Like Aurion's army before them, this fleet disappeared into the smoking sea, swallowed by whatever horrors lurked in the ruins of the old empire. Volantis, once mighty, was broken. Its people were starving, its treasury bled dry, and its armies shattered. In time, the elephants seized power, replacing the tigers. The age of conquest was over, and Volantis never again held the same dominance. While the free cities tore each other apart in the west, a different kind of catastrophe was emerging from the east. The grasslands of central Essos, previously controlled by Valyrian power, exploded into warfare as the Dothraki came riding out of the deep grass. The Dothraki were no unified empire. They were dozens of separate khalasars, horse-born tribes that lived for war and conquest. But the vacuum left by Valyria's fall provided opportunity, and one Khal had the vision to seize it. Khal Mengo, acting on advice from his mother Doshi, began the Great Unification. One by one, he brought the 60 separate khalasars under his command, creating a horde unlike anything the world had ever seen. Instead of turning his massive khalasar against other Dothraki tribes, Mengo looked west toward the settled lands left defenseless by the Doom. His first targets were the tall men of the kingdom of Sarnor. These ancient people, descendants of a once great civilization, made a fatal error in judgment. Instead of recognizing the threat the unified Dothraki posed, the Sarnori tried to use them as mercenaries in their own petty wars. They offered Khal Mengo gold and goods in exchange for his warriors' service. Mengo accepted their offers, and then took the lands as well. The Sarnori had invited wolves into their sheep pen. The fields, farms, and towns they had built over generations were put to the torch. The settled lands returned to wild grassland, and the Dothraki claimed them as their own. The Dothraki destruction wasn't limited to the Sarnori. As their khalasars spread across central Essos, they encountered other peoples, other cities, other civilizations, and destroyed them all with equal efficiency. But not every city fell so easily. Sometimes, the settled people managed to mount effective resistance. The most famous example of this was at Qohor, one of the free cities. Khal Mengo rode west with 20,000 screaming horsemen, intent on adding another city to the Dothraki's growing collection of ruins. The Qohoric had prepared as best they could. They strengthened their walls, hired 2 free companies of sellswords, and, as an afterthought, sent a man to Astapor to purchase 3,000 Unsullied. The Unsullied were legendary, slave soldiers trained from birth to know no fear, feel no pain, and never break ranks. They were expensive, but the Qohoric figured 3,000 of them might be useful if the Dothraki proved troublesome. The trouble was, the Dothraki arrived before the Unsullied. 20,000 horsemen crashed against Qohor's defenses like a tide of steel and fury. The walls held, but the free companies broke and fled. The city's own militia lasted barely longer. By nightfall, Qohor seemed doomed, but during the night, the 3,000 Unsullied arrived. When dawn broke, and the Dothraki prepared for their victory parade through Qohor's streets, they found 3,000 silent figures standing before the gates. No banners, no war cries, no boasts or challenges. Just 3,000 men in identical armor, holding identical spears, waiting with identical patience. Khal Mengo ordered the attack. 18 times the Dothraki charged. 18 times they were repelled. The Unsullied fought in perfect formation, their spears never breaking. By the 4th day, 2,400 Dothraki lay dead, including Khal Mengo himself. The survivors bent the knee. From that day forth, the Unsullied became the eternal guardians of Qohor, their legend etched into history. For nearly 100 years, Essos was torn apart. Empires rose and fell, cities burned, and entire peoples were erased from the map. By its end, Volantis was a broken power, ruled by cautious elephants instead of ambitious tigers. The disputed lands remained a battlefield of mercenaries and shifting borders. The grasslands were now the Dothraki Sea, ruled by horse lords whose riders had no equal. And in the west, on Dragonstone, the Targaryens endured. While others bled, they waited. When the century of blood was over, their time had come. For across the narrow sea, a young dragonlord would soon set his sights on Westeros. Aegon's conquest was near. If you want to know what happened after it, subscribe for the next chapter.